Kids like you need to know your place. The words hang in the air of a 7th grade history classroom. A 12-year-old boy sits frozen at his desk, fingers still gripping a crumpled piece of paper. His report about his father's job. Around him, 23 students hold their breath. Some smirk. Others look away. None speak. The teacher leans closer, her manicured nail pointing directly at his face. A 4-star general? Really? Next time, say your father flies rockets to the moon. At least that would be more creative. The boy's name is Jalen Carter. He has not seen his father in 14 months. He has filed 3 complaints about bullying at this school. All 3 have disappeared from the system. And in exactly 47 minutes, a door will open. A man will step through. 4 stars will gleam on his shoulders. But right now, Jalen does not know this. Right now, he is alone. This is the story of what happens when prejudice meets the truth. It never expected. The morning had started the way most mornings started for Jalen, in silence. 6:15 a.m. The alarm clock did not need to ring. Jalen's eyes opened exactly 1 minute before it was set to go off. A habit he could not explain but had never been able to break. He lay still for 3 seconds, counting the cracks in the ceiling. 7 cracks. Same as yesterday. Same as every day for the past 14 months. He rose from bed and made it immediately. Hospital corners. 45-degree folds. The blanket pulled tight enough to bounce a quarter. His grandmother had asked him once why he did this, why he spent 4 minutes every morning making a bed he would just sleep in again that night. Because it matters, he had answered. Because it is the first thing I can control. She had not asked again. The house was quiet as Jalen moved through it. 14 steps from his bedroom to the kitchen. He had counted them so many times that his feet knew the path without his eyes. At the kitchen doorway, he paused, a habit born from something he could not name, and scanned the windows. Front window, clear. Side window, clear. Back door, locked. Only then did he sit down. His grandmother, Ruth Carter, stood at the stove. She was 67 years old, with silver hair pulled back tight and hands that never seemed to stop moving. She had raised Jalen since he was 6, since the accident that took his mother, since his father's grief had transformed into a different kind of absence. The kind measured in deployment orders and classified missions. "Eggs or oatmeal?" she asked without turning around. "Oatmeal, please." "You said that yesterday." "I know." She set the bowl in front of him, then sat across the table. Her eyes studied his face the way they always did, searching for something he was not sure how to give her. "How is school? Fine? That Bradley boy still bothering you?" Jalen's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "It is fine, Grandma. That is not what I asked." He set the spoon down. "I handle it." Ruth Carter had survived 67 years by knowing when to push and when to wait. This morning, she chose to wait. But her eyes did not leave his face, and when he finally looked up, she spoke again. "Your father called last night, after you went to sleep." Jalen's expression did not change, but his hand tightened around the spoon. "What did he say?" "He asked about you, how you are doing, how school is going." "What did you tell him?" Ruth was silent for a long moment. "I told him the truth, that you are changing, that something is wrong, that you need him." Jalen pushed back from the table. "I have to catch the bus. Jalen." "I will be fine, Grandma. I promise." He grabbed his backpack from the hook by the door. Inside it, buried beneath textbooks and folders, was a piece of paper he had spent 3 nights writing. A report about his father's job. A report that told the truth. He had no idea what that truth would cost him today. The school bus arrived at 7:22 a.m., same as always. Jalen took his seat in the front row, directly behind the driver, a position he had claimed on the first day of 7th grade and defended every day since. The front seat meant visibility. It meant witnesses. It meant a smaller chance of what happened in the back rows, where hands moved in the darkness between seats and voices carried words designed to wound. The driver, an older man named Mr. Patterson, nodded at Jalen through the rearview mirror. A small acknowledgement. A tiny kindness in a day that would offer few. Jalen pulled out his notebook and pretended to review his homework. In reality, he was counting the stops, counting the students who boarded, counting the seconds until Bradley Prescott's stop, which came third from the end. The bus groaned to a halt on Maple Street. Jalen's shoulders tensed. Bradley Prescott climbed aboard like he owned the vehicle. 13 years old, broad-shouldered, with the easy confidence of a boy who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. His father was State Senator Thomas Prescott, a name that appeared on yard signs every November and in the local newspaper every time a ribbon needed cutting. Bradley's eyes found Jalen immediately. They always did. "Hey, Carter!" Bradley's voice carried through the bus like a performance. "Why you sitting up front? Scared the back of the bus is too dark for you?" Laughter rippled through the seats. Jalen did not respond. He kept his eyes on his notebook, his pen moving across paper in meaningless loops. Bradley paused at Jalen's row. "What is that? Your diary? Writing about all the friends you do not have?" More laughter. Someone in the back row whistled. Jalen's pen did not stop moving. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted each breath. 5, 6, 7. Bradley leaned closer. "My dad says people like you always sit in the front. Old habits, right?" The words landed exactly where they were meant to land. Jalen's pen stopped. His jaw tightened. But he did not look up. He did not respond. Mr. Patterson's voice cut through the tension. "Take your seat, Bradley. Now?" Bradley held his position for one more second, long enough to establish dominance, short enough to avoid real consequences, then sauntered toward the back. His friends welcomed him with fist bumps and whispered congratulations. Jalen's pen resumed its movement across the page. 1, 2, 3, 4. The bus pulled away from the curb. If you are watching this and have not subscribed yet, hit that button now. You do not want to miss what happens next. Riverside Middle School sat on 12 acres of manicured grass in one of Virginia's most affluent suburbs. The building itself was only 15 years old. All glass and brick and motivational posters about reaching for the stars. The student body was 87% white, 6% Asian, 4% Hispanic, and 3% black. Jalen Carter was one of 19 black students in a school of over 600. He entered through the east doors at 7:48 a.m., the same doors he used every day because they were closest to his first period class and farthest from Bradley Prescott's locker. The hallway was already filling with students, clusters of friends, couples holding hands, athletes in Letterman jackets, walking like they owned the corridor. Jalen moved through them like water around stones. Unseen, unacknowledged, exactly how he preferred it. His locker was number 247, positioned between the gym and the science wing. As he approached it, his steps slowed. Something was different. The metal surface, usually plain gray, now bore a faint discoloration, the ghost of something that had been cleaned but not quite erased. Jalen ran his fingers over the mark. Paint. Someone had spray-painted something on his locker, and someone else had attempted to remove it. Neither party had informed him. He opened the locker without reaction. His face remained neutral, his breathing steady. Whatever had been written there, and he could guess the general category of its message, was gone now. Officially, it had never existed. This was how things worked at Riverside Middle School. Problems disappeared. Evidence was erased. And boys like Jalen learned to keep walking. "Jalen?" The voice came from behind him. Female, warm, one of the few voices in this building that did not make his shoulders tense. He turned. Mrs. Denise Okonkwo stood in the hallway, a stack of papers in her arms and a gentle concern in her eyes. She was 43, Nigerian-American, and the only teacher at Riverside who had ever remembered his birthday. "Good morning, Mrs. Okonkwo. I saw your math homework from yesterday." She smiled. "Excellent work on the proofs. The logical progression was impressive." "Thank you. Have you thought more about the STEM competition? The application deadline is Friday." Jalen's hand paused on his locker door. The STEM competition. He had submitted his application 2 weeks ago. He had placed it directly on Coach Nolan's desk, as instructed, because Coach Nolan was the faculty's sponsor. He had never received a confirmation. "I submitted my application already," he said carefully. 2 weeks ago." Mrs. Okonkwo's brow furrowed. "I did not see your name on the list." "I put it on Coach Nolan's desk." Something flickered across her face. A shadow of understanding, perhaps, or suspicion. "I will look into it. Your work deserves to be considered." "Thank you, Mrs. Okonkwo." She nodded and moved on, disappearing into the flow of students. Jalen watched her go, then turned back to his locker. His STEM application had been 43 pages of research on electromagnetic propulsion systems. He had spent 2 months on it. He had printed it on his grandmother's ancient printer, page by page, because they could not afford a new ink cartridge and had to wait between prints for the old one to recover. 2 weeks ago, he had placed that application on Coach Nolan's desk. Today, his name was not on the list. Jalen closed his locker. His face betrayed nothing. But deep in his chest, something small and tired sighed. First period was English. Second period was biology. Third period was physical education, which meant Coach Derek Nolan, which meant trouble. The gymnasium smelled like sweat and industrial cleaner. Jalen changed quickly in the locker room, keeping his back to the wall and his eyes on the exits. Bradley and his friends were across the room, loud and laughing. But they had not noticed him yet. He slipped out to the gym floor with 30 seconds to spare. Coach Nolan stood at center court with a clipboard, his whistle hanging from his neck like a medal. He was 38 years old, with the build of a former college athlete gone slightly soft, and the easy authority of a man who had never questioned his own judgment. "Carter," Nolan's eyes found him immediately. "You are late. The bell has not." The bell rang. 8:52 a.m. exactly. "I said you are late." Nolan made a mark on his clipboard. 10 laps around the gym. Start now." Jalen opened his mouth, then closed it. He had learned by now that arguing with Coach Nolan produced only one result: more laps. He began to run. Behind him, Bradley Prescott arrived 2 full minutes after the bell. Coach Nolan looked up, nodded, and returned to his clipboard. "Good to see you, Bradley. Join your team for warm-ups." Jalen's feet pounded against the hardwood. 1 lap. 2 laps. The rhythm was familiar. The injustice was familiar. Everything about this moment was familiar. He ran his 10 laps in silence. When he finished, chest heaving, he took his place at the back of the group. Coach Nolan did not acknowledge his return. Lunch arrived at 12:15 p.m. Jalen collected his tray, a rectangle of pizza that might have been cardboard, a pile of corn that might have been plastic, and a carton of milk that was definitely expired, and carried it to the far corner of the cafeteria. He always sat in the same spot. Back to the wall, clear sight lines to both exits. No one at the surrounding tables. For 12 minutes, he ate in peace. He reviewed his notes for 5th period. He checked his homework for 6th. He did not look up when the cafeteria grew louder around him. He did not need to look up to know who was approaching. "Hey, General Jr.!" Bradley's shadow fell across the table. 3 other boys flanked him: Marcus Webb, Tyler Downs, and Jacob Pierce. They formed a loose semicircle around Jalen's corner, blocking his path to both exits. Jalen set down his fork. "What do you want, Bradley?" "Just being friendly." Bradley pulled out a chair and sat down, uninvited. "Checking in on my favorite charity case." "I am not a charity case." "No," Bradley's smile widened. "Your grandma works at the church food pantry, right? Getting first pick of the donations?" The words hit their target. Jalen's grandmother did volunteer at the church food pantry. She also sometimes brought home items that would otherwise be discarded. There was no shame in this. There was no shame in survival. But Bradley wielded the fact like a weapon anyway. "Leave me alone, Bradley." "Or what?" Bradley leaned forward. "You will tell your dad?" "Oh, wait. Where is your dad again?" "He is in the army, right?" "Sorry. I mean, he is a janitor on an army base." "Or wait. What was it you told everyone last month? He is a general?" Laughter from the 3 boys behind him. Bradley continued, his voice rising so nearby tables could hear. "A 4-star general. That is what you said. Jalen Carter's daddy is a 4-star general who commands, like, the whole military or something." "I never said—" "So where is he then?" Bradley spread his hands. "If your dad is such a big deal, why has nobody ever seen him? Why are you wearing the same 3 shirts every week? Why does your grandma drive a car from, like, 1992? Jalen's hands flattened against the table. His breath came steady and slow. 1, 2, 3, 4. "My father serves this country," he said quietly. "That is all I have to say." "Serves this country?" Bradley laughed. "Right. Serving up burgers at the base cafeteria, maybe." He reached across the table and flicked Jalen's milk carton. It tipped, spilling across the tray, soaking into Jalen's pizza, dripping onto his lap. Jalen did not move. "Oops!" Bradley stood, brushing his hands clean. "Looks like you had a little accident, Carter. Better clean that up before someone slips." The 4 boys walked away laughing. Jalen remained seated, milk dripping from the edge of the table onto the floor. He did not wipe it up immediately. He sat there, counting his breaths, waiting for the trembling in his hands to stop. 1, 2, 3, 4. When his hands were steady, he stood. He cleaned the mess. He threw away his ruined lunch. And he walked out of the cafeteria with his head held high, because that was the only thing they could not take from him. 1:15 p.m. Vice Principal Ruth Slade's office. Jalen sat in a hard plastic chair facing a desk covered with family photographs, motivational paperweights, and a small sign that read, "Discipline creates success." Behind the desk, Vice Principal Slade reviewed something on her computer screen. She was 55 years old, with steel gray hair and the practiced expression of someone who had learned to look concerned without actually feeling concern. "You wanted to report an incident," she said without looking up. "Yes, ma'am. Bradley Prescott poured milk on me in the cafeteria. This is the 4th time this month he has done something like this. Do you have witnesses? The entire cafeteria. Do you have anyone willing to provide a written statement? Jalen paused. He thought of the dozens of students who had watched, the ones who had laughed, the ones who had looked away, the ones who had seen everything and would say nothing. I do not know, he admitted. Vice Principal Slade finally looked up. Her expression was patient, practiced, empty. Mr. Carter, I understand that middle school can be difficult. Students sometimes have conflicts, but without documentation, without witnesses willing to come forward, there is very little I can do. I have documentation. Jalen reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. Inside were 3 sheets of paper, printouts of complaint forms he had submitted through the school's online system, each stamped with a received date. These are the 3 complaints I have filed since September, he said, placing them on the desk. September 15th, October 2nd, October 28th. Your office confirmed receipt of each one. Vice Principal Slade's eyes moved to the papers. Her expression did not change, but something in her posture stiffened. I was told there was no record of these complaints, Jalen continued, but I kept copies. Each one includes a submission number. Each one was marked as received. Silence. Mr. Carter, Slade's voice had cooled by several degrees. I will look into this, but I want to caution you against making accusations you cannot support. I am not making accusations. I am showing you evidence. Evidence of what, exactly? Evidence that I filed complaints. Evidence that someone deleted them. The words hung in the air between them. Slade's fingers had stopped moving on her keyboard. That is a very serious accusation. It is a very serious situation. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Slade gathered the papers and placed them in a drawer. I will review these. You may return to class. Jalen stood. At the door, he paused. Ma'am? Yes? Submission number 5103. The one from October 28th. He met her eyes. When I checked the system this morning, the status had changed from archived to deleted by administrator. I have a screenshot. He did not wait for her response. He walked out of the office and closed the door quietly behind him. In the hallway, his hands were shaking again. But his voice, when he had spoken, had been steady. Small victories. 1:45 p.m. The boys' locker room. Jalen's gym locker was in the back row, far from the windows and even farther from Coach Nolan's office. He approached it after his final lap. Coach had added 5 extra as punishment for attitude and spun the combination lock. The door swung open. His clothes were inside, or rather, what remained of his clothes. Someone had taken scissors to his shirt, reducing it to strips of fabric. His jeans had fared slightly better. Only one leg had been cut open from knee to hem. Jalen stared at the destruction for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched the fabric, as if confirming it was real. Oh, man! Bradley's voice came from behind him. Who did that? That is terrible. Jalen turned slowly. Bradley stood 3 feet away, flanked by Tyler and Marcus. Jacob blocked the exit to the hallway. I do not know, Jalen said evenly, but there are cameras in the gymnasium hallway. Are there? Bradley's smile faltered slightly. I did not know that. They cover both entrances, including the one you came through 6 minutes ago. This was a guess. Jalen had studied the camera positions weeks ago, had mapped their angles and blind spots, but he did not actually know whether they were recording or whether anyone ever reviewed the footage. But Bradley did not know that. Whatever, man. Bradley stepped closer anyway, emboldened by his numbers. You know what your problem is, Carter? You think you are better than everyone. Walking around with your little folder of complaints, talking about your fake general daddy. My father is not fake. Then where is he? Bradley spread his arms. It has been what? A year? More? If he was real, if he actually cared about you, he would be here. But he is not. Because you are nothing, Carter. Your daddy is nothing. And the sooner you learn that, the easier your life is going to be. The words should have hurt. They were designed to hurt. But Jalen had heard variations of them so many times that they had lost their sharpness. They were just sounds now, just noise, just another thing to survive. You should probably go, Jalen said quietly, before the period ends and someone comes to check. Bradley's face reddened. He was not used to dismissal. He was used to fear, to submission, to visible wounds that proved his power. He shoved Jalen hard, driving him back against the lockers. Metal crashed. Jalen's shoulder absorbed the impact, turning his body sideways, letting the momentum dissipate rather than concentrating it. A small adjustment. An instinct he could not explain. He did not shove back. He did not swing. He simply stood there, breathing steadily, waiting. Bradley's confusion was visible. This was not how it was supposed to go. "What is wrong with you?" Bradley demanded. "Fight back or something?" "No." "Why not?" "Because that is what you want." Jalen met his eyes. "You want me to hit you so you can tell everyone I attacked you. You want me suspended. You want me gone. But I am not going anywhere, Bradley. Not because of you." The locker room was silent. Tyler and Marcus exchanged uncertain glances. Jacob shifted his weight near the door. "You are a freak," Bradley finally said. "A weird, lying freak." "Maybe." Jalen's voice did not waver. "But I know what I am. Do you?" Bradley's fist clenched. For a moment, it seemed like he might swing anyway. Consequences be damned. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Adult footsteps, coming closer. "Whatever." Bradley stepped back, jerking his head at his friends. "Let us go. This loser is not worth it." They left through the far door, the one that led to the gym rather than the hallway. Jalen watched them go, then looked down at his ruined clothes. He had a spare shirt in his backpack. He always carried a spare shirt now. Small preparations for small wars. This story is just getting started. If you are feeling what Jalen is going through, leave a comment below. Your engagement helps more people see stories like this. 2 p.m. Jalen walked through the hallway toward fifth period, wearing his spare shirt and trying not to think about how he would explain the ruined clothes to his grandmother. He passed Coach Nolan's office. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, he could hear a voice, Coach Nolan's voice, on the phone. "No, it is not a big deal. The Carter kid likes to make things up. You know how it is. I will handle it." Jalen stopped. He stepped closer to the wall, out of the line of sight through the doorway, and listened. "Right. I understand. Senator Prescott does not want any drama before the election. Neither do we. I told Ruth we would keep it quiet. She agreed. Ruth, Vice Principal Ruth Slade. Yeah, the kid filed some complaints online. Digital stuff. Ruth archived most of them, deleted the worst one. No paper trail now." Jalen's hand found his phone in his pocket. His thumb moved automatically, opening the camera app, switching to video. He held the phone at his side, angled toward the open doorway, and pressed record. "Look, the Carter boy has no friends, no credibility. His dad is supposedly some military guy, but nobody has ever met him. It is just a matter of time before he transfers out or gives up. We just have to wait it out. A text notification appeared on Coach Nolan's phone. Through the crack in the door, Jalen could see him glance at it. Okay, I have to go, but yeah, keep it contained. We are all on the same page here. The call ended. Jalen slipped his phone back into his pocket and continued walking, his pace unchanged, his expression neutral. He had not captured the conversation clearly. The audio would be muffled, the angle wrong, the video shaky. But he had something. Evidence that Coach Nolan was coordinating with Vice Principal Slade. Evidence that his complaints had been deliberately deleted. It was not enough. Not yet. But it was something. Jalen entered his fifth period classroom and took his seat. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. One battle at a time. 2:30 p.m. History class. The moment everything changed. Ms. Greta Harmon's classroom was decorated with maps of ancient civilizations and inspirational quotes about learning from the past. Her desk was positioned at the front of the room like a judge's bench, elevated slightly on a small platform that she claimed improved her view of the students. Jalen suspected she just liked looking down on people. He sat in the back row, as always, near the window. His report about his father was in his hands, 2 pages of careful handwriting describing a career that spanned 30 years and 3 continents. He had written it 3 times before getting the words right. All right, everyone. Ms. Harmon clapped her hands twice, her signal for attention. Today we finish our career presentations. Remember, this is worth 20% of your grade, so I expect effort and honesty. Honesty. The word felt bitter in Jalen's mouth. Bradley, you are up first. Bradley Prescott stood with the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted his welcome anywhere. He walked to the front of the room, note cards in hand, and began. My father is State Senator Thomas Prescott. He represents the 14th District of Virginia. He writes laws that protect families and businesses. He has been on TV talking about education reform. Last year, he received the Governor's Award for Public Service. Ms. Harmon nodded along, her expression approving. When Bradley finished, she smiled. Excellent work, Bradley. Clearly, public service runs in your family. A+. Bradley returned to his seat, accepting high fives from his friends along the way. 6 more students presented. A doctor's daughter, an engineer's son, a real estate agent's twins. Each received praise, encouragement, a letter grade assigned before they finished speaking. Jalen Carter. The sound of his name silenced the classroom chatter. Jalen stood slowly, his report gripped tight in both hands. He walked to the front of the room, feeling 23 pairs of eyes on his back. He turned to face the class, and he began. My father's name is Darius Carter. He has served in the United States military for 30 years. He is currently deployed overseas on a classified mission. His rank is... Excuse me. Ms. Harmon's voice cut through his words like a blade. She had risen from her desk and was moving toward him, her heels clicking against the floor. Your father is in the military? Yes, ma'am. And his rank is what, exactly? Jalen took a breath. He is a 4-star general. He commands... The laughter started before he could finish. Bradley's laugh first, loud and sharp, then spreading through the classroom like fire. Ms. Harmon did not stop it. She stood in front of Jalen, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised in theatrical disbelief. A 4-star general! Her voice dripped with condescension. You expect us to believe that your father is a 4-star general in the United States military. It is the truth. Is it? She turned to the class, playing to her audience. Has anyone ever met Jalen's father? This four-star general who commands the entire military. More laughter. Jalen's grip tightened on his report. He is deployed, he said quietly. He has been overseas for 14 months. 14 months, Ms. Harmon nodded slowly, mockingly. How convenient. A father no one has ever seen, at a rank no one can verify, deployed to a location no one can check. I am not lying. Then explain this to me, Jalen. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive and suffocating. If your father is such an important military leader, why do you wear the same shirts every week? Why does your grandmother drive a car that belongs in a museum? Why do you eat the free lunch program every single day? The classroom had gone silent. The laughter had died. Even Bradley was watching now, his smirk frozen on his face. My father sends money home, Jalen said. His voice was smaller now, despite his efforts to keep it strong. My grandmother saves most of it. She says it is for my college. How noble. Ms. Harmon's smile did not reach her eyes. Or how fictional. Tell me, Jalen, do you know what we call people who make up stories to seem more important than they are? He did not answer. We call them liars. She said the word slowly, deliberately, letting it hang in the air. Liars who waste everyone's time with fantasies instead of doing honest work. I am not... Stop. She held up one hand. Stop lying about your father. People like you should learn to tell the truth. It would make all of our lives easier. The words landed like physical blows. People like you. The phrase echoed in Jalen's ears, carrying meanings that went far beyond this moment, this classroom, this school. Bradley's voice rose from the back of the room. Yeah, Carter. Tell us more about your fake daddy. Is he friends with the president too? Laughter exploded again. Ms. Harmon did not silence it. She watched Jalen's face, watched the way his eyes glistened but did not overflow, watched the way his shoulders stayed straight, even as everything inside him crumbled. A four-star general, she repeated, shaking her head. Next time, say your father flies rockets to the moon. At least that would be more creative. Jalen stood frozen at the front of the classroom. His report, 2 pages of truth about a father he had not seen in 14 months, trembled in his hands. Con, I am not lying. His voice cracked on the first syllable. My father is really... Enough! Ms. Harmon's voice rose to fill the room. Sit down and apologize to the class for wasting their time with your little fantasy. Jalen did not move. I said, sit down, Jalen. He remained standing. Something shifted in Ms. Harmon's expression. The theatrical disapproval hardened into something colder, something meaner. She stepped closer, her finger rising to point directly at his face. Let me make something very clear to you. Her voice dropped to a hiss that somehow still carried to every corner of the room. Kids like you need to know your place. You do not get to walk in here and tell lies about having a famous father. You do not get to pretend you are something you are not. You sit in the back. You stay quiet. You accept what you are given. That is how this works. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. Jalen's chin lifted. His eyes, still glistening, met Ms. Harmon's directly. My father, he said slowly, clearly, is General Darius Carter. He commands U.S. Stratcom. He has served this country for 30 years, and I am proud of him. Ms. Harmon's face flushed red. Get out! Ma'am, get out of my classroom. Now, I will not have you disrupting my class with your lies and your attitude. Report to the vice principal's office immediately." Jalen gathered his report from where it had fallen. He walked to his desk, collected his backpack, and moved toward the door. Every step felt like a mile. Every whisper from his classmates felt like a knife. At the door, he paused. He turned back to face Ms. Harmon one final time. "I have never lied to you," he said. "About anything." Then he walked out of the room and closed the door behind him. The hallway stretched empty before him. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere distant, a locker slammed. Jalen walked slowly, each step deliberate. He was not heading to the vice principal's office. He knew what waited for him there: more dismissal, more doubt, more deletion of evidence. Instead, he found an empty bench near the library entrance and sat down. His hands were shaking now, tremors he could not control. His chest felt tight, his breathing shallow. For 12 years, he had believed that truth meant something, that if you told the truth, eventually someone would listen. Eventually, someone would believe. But truth, he was learning, only mattered to people who wanted to hear it. He pulled his phone from his pocket and opened the photo app. The picture filled the screen, a photograph taken 3 years ago, before the last deployment, before the long silence. His father stood in full dress uniform, medals gleaming, 4 stars bright on his shoulders. Jalen stood beside him, younger and smaller, wearing his father's service cap tilted sideways on his head. They were both smiling. Jalen stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he closed the app and put the phone away. 3 blocks away, a black SUV with government plates turned onto the street leading to Riverside Middle School. Darius Carter had not seen his son in 14 months. The deployment had been sudden, a crisis in the Pacific that demanded immediate attention from the highest levels of military command. As the commanding general of United States Strategic Command, Darius was responsible for nuclear deterrence, global strike capabilities, and strategic planning for the nation's defense. When the president called, he answered. When duty demanded, he responded. But duty had kept him away from a boy who needed his father. He sat in the back of the SUV, watching the Virginia suburbs roll past the tinted windows. The trees were changing colors, oranges and reds that he had missed for so many seasons. His son's school was approaching, visible now beyond the manicured lawns and flagpoles. Colonel Marcus Webb sat in the front passenger seat, coordinating final security details through a tablet. "Sir, the school has been notified of your visit. They are preparing." "Cancel the notification." Webb turned, surprise evident on his face. "Sir, I said cancel it. Do not tell them I am coming." "General, protocol requires—" "I know what protocol requires, Colonel." Darius's voice was quiet, but carried an edge that silenced all argument. "I also know that my son's grandmother called me 3 weeks ago. She told me something was wrong. She told me he was changing. She told me he needed me." He paused, looking out the window at the school building growing larger ahead. "When I called the school to ask about his well-being, they told me everything was fine. No problems, no concerns. A model student in a supportive environment." His jaw tightened. "But Ruth does not lie. She has never lied to me about Jalen. So either she is wrong or they are." Webb was silent. "I want to see," Darius continued, "what happens when they do not know I am watching. I want to see the truth. And if the truth is different from what they told me—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The SUV turned into the school parking lot. 3 minutes later, Darius Carter walked through the main entrance of Riverside Middle School. He was flanked by two officers in dress uniform, their presence more ceremonial than security, but enough to draw immediate attention. The security guard at the front desk looked up, did a double-take, and nearly dropped his coffee. "Excuse me, sir. I need to see." Colonel Webb stepped forward with a leather folder. Inside were credentials, authorization letters, and a direct request from the Pentagon for access to student Jalen Carter. The security guard read the papers twice. His face changed colors 3 times. "Yes, sir," he finally managed. "Right this way, sir. I mean, let me just call the office and—" "That will not be necessary." Darius's voice was calm. "I know where I am going." He did not, actually, but he had spent 30 years reading situations, reading people, reading the space between what was said and what was true. He followed the sounds, out of the distant buzz of classroom voices, the echo of footsteps, the rhythm of a school in session. And then he heard it. A woman's voice, sharp and cutting, carrying through the hallway from a classroom ahead. "Stop lying about your father." Darius stopped walking. "People like you should learn to tell the truth." His hands, which had remained steady through combat zones and crisis negotiations, and moments when the fate of nations hung in the balance, began to tremble. A younger voice responded, a voice he had not heard in 14 months, a voice that had changed and deepened and cracked with emotion. "I am not lying. He is really, enough. Sit down." Darius moved toward the classroom door. Each step was deliberate, controlled. The walk of a man who had learned long ago to master his emotions before they mastered him. Through the small window in the door, he could see his son standing at the front of a classroom. A woman stood before him, finger pointed at his face. The other students watched like spectators at a blood sport. "Kids like you need to know your place." The words hit Darius like artillery fire. His hand closed around the door handle. If this story is making you feel something, you are not alone. Hit that subscribe button. The next part will change everything. 2:47 p.m. The door opened. Light from the hallway flooded into the classroom. A silhouette appeared in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakable in the sharp lines of military dress uniform. Ms. Harmon turned toward the interruption, irritation already forming on her face. "Excuse me, this is a closed class. You cannot just—" Her voice died. The man stepped into the room. The fluorescent lights caught the details one by one, the pressed blue uniform, the rows of ribbons and medals across his chest, the 4 silver stars gleaming on each shoulder. His face was weathered by years of command, his posture straight as a flagpole, his presence filling the room like a physical force. Behind him, 2 more officers entered, taking positions on either side of the door. 23 students stared in frozen silence. Ms. Harmon's hand, still raised from pointing at Jalen, slowly lowered to her side. Jalen stood motionless at the front of the classroom. His eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on the man in the doorway. His report slipped from his fingers and drifted to the floor. "Dad?" The word was barely a whisper. A question and a prayer and 14 months of loneliness compressed into a single syllable. Darius Carter did not respond immediately. His eyes swept the room, taking in the arrangement of desks, the frozen faces of the students, the paling complexion of the teacher who had just told his son to know his place. Then he looked at Jalen, and his voice, when it finally came, was soft enough to carry only to his son. "I am here." Jalen moved first. The distance between them was perhaps 15 feet, but he crossed it in what seemed like a single heartbeat, his arms wrapping around his father with a desperation that shattered the silence of the room. Darius caught him, held him, one hand pressed against the back of his son's head, the other wrapped tight around his shoulders. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Darius straightened. His arm remained around Jalen's shoulders, but his eyes lifted to meet Miss Harmon's. "I heard what you said to my son." His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The words filled every corner of the room with the weight of 30 years of command. Ms. Harmon's mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. "I heard you call him a liar." Darius took one step forward, Jalen still at his side. "I heard you tell him that kids like him need to know their place. I heard you mock him, humiliate him in front of his peers." "General, Ms. Harmon finally found her voice. "I had no idea." "No idea of what? That he was telling the truth?" Darius's gaze did not waver. "Or no idea that someone was listening?" The classroom was deathly silent. Bradley Prescott had shrunk into his seat, his face the color of ash. The other students seemed to be trying to disappear entirely. "Let me tell you something about my son." Darius's voice carried easily now, pitched for everyone to hear. "For 14 months, while I served this country on the other side of the world, Jalen has lived without his father. He has gone to school every day, done his homework every night, helped his grandmother with everything she needed. He has done this without complaint, without asking for sympathy, without using my name to seek special treatment." He paused, looking down at Jalen, then back at the teacher. "He has more courage in his smallest finger than most people develop in a lifetime. And you looked at him and saw only what you expected to see. A poor black boy with a story too good to be true. So you did not bother to ask. You did not bother to verify. You simply decided he was lying and punished him for your own assumptions." Ms. Harmon's composure had completely collapsed. Tears were forming in her eyes, tears of shame or fear or simple shock. It was impossible to tell. "I was just... the presentation. I thought..." "You thought." Darius repeated the words like a verdict. "You thought. And on the basis of what you thought, you humiliated a 12-year-old child in front of his classmates. You called him a liar. You told him to know his place." He stepped closer. Ms. Harmon stepped back. "Let me tell you about place, Ms. Harmon. My family has served this country for 4 generations. My grandfather fought in Europe during World War II and came home to a nation that would not let him use the same drinking fountains as the men he saved in battle. My father served in Vietnam and was spat on when he returned. I have commanded soldiers of every color and creed, and I have watched them bleed and sacrifice and die for a country that still cannot decide whether their children deserve basic dignity in a classroom." The silence was absolute. "Jalen's place," Darius continued, his voice dropping to something just above a whisper, "is wherever he earns the right to stand. His place is determined by his character, his integrity, his achievements, not by the assumptions of people who look at his skin and decide what he must be." He straightened, releasing his son's shoulder, but keeping one hand on his back. "I will be meeting with your principal and your superintendent, and anyone else who needs to understand what happened in this room today. But before I do, I want you to look at my what, Miss." Harmon's eyes, wet and wide, moved to Jalen. "He told you the truth. From the beginning, he told you the truth. And you did not believe him. Not because his story was unbelievable, but because you could not believe it about him." The words hung in the air like a judgment. Remember this moment, Ms. Harmon. Remember it the next time you look at a student and make assumptions about who they are and what they can become. Because you were wrong about my son, and I suspect you have been wrong about many others. Darius turned to Jalen. Get your things. We are leaving. Jalen moved to his desk, gathered his backpack, and returned to his father's side. As they walked toward the door, passing between the rows of silent students, Bradley Prescott's voice emerged in a whisper. I did not know? Darius paused. He looked at the boy who had tormented his son for months, this child of privilege and protection who had never faced consequences for his cruelty. Now you do, he said simply. What you choose to do with that knowledge is up to you. Then he led his son out of the classroom, the two officers falling into step behind them, and the door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any shout. The hallway stretched before them, empty and echoing. Jalen walked beside his father, struggling to process the last 5 minutes. Struggling, really, to process the last 14 months that had suddenly been interrupted by this impossible moment. Dad! His voice was hoarse. How did you... Why are you... Your grandmother called me. Darius stopped walking, turning to face his son. 3 weeks ago, she told me you were in trouble, that something was wrong, and you would not talk about it. I did not want to worry. I know. Darius placed both hands on Jalen's shoulders. I know why you did not say anything. You wanted to handle it yourself. You wanted to be strong. You wanted to protect me from worrying while I was deployed. His voice softened. But Jalen, you are 12 years old. You should not have to carry this alone. No one should. Jalen's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down his cheeks. Tears he had been holding back for months. Tears he had refused to shed in front of Bradley, or Ms. Harmon, or anyone who might see them as weakness. They would not believe me, he whispered. Nobody would believe me. I filed complaints, and they deleted them. I tried to tell them about you, and they laughed. I did everything right, and nothing worked. Darius pulled his son into another embrace. This time, when he spoke, his own voice was thick with emotion. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. The system failed you. The people who were supposed to protect you failed you. But you never gave up. You never stopped telling the truth. You never stopped being who I raised you to be. He held Jalen for a long moment. There, in that empty hallway, 2 officers standing guard at a respectful distance. Then he straightened, wiping his own eyes with the back of his hand. Now, he said, let us go have a conversation with the people in charge. The principal's office smelled like old coffee and new carpet. Jalen sat in a leather chair that seemed designed to make visitors feel small, his father beside him, the 2 uniformed officers stationed outside the door. Across the desk, Principal David Marsh shuffled papers with trembling hands, while Vice Principal Ruth Slade stood near the window, her face carefully blank. General Carter, Principal Marsh cleared his throat for the 3rd time in 2 minutes. This is certainly unexpected. If we had known you were coming, we would have prepared. Prepared what, exactly? Darius's voice was calm, but carried an edge that silenced the principal mid-sentence. A welcoming committee? A press release? Or perhaps a better explanation for why my son has been systematically bullied for 4 months while your staff deleted his complaints? The silence that followed was suffocating. I am not sure what you mean by... Darius reached into his uniform jacket and withdrew a folder. He placed it on the desk with deliberate precision, then opened it to reveal 3 printed pages. These are copies of complaints my son filed through your school's online reporting system. September 15th, October 2nd, October 28th. Each one was time-stamped, assigned a submission number, and marked as received by your office. Principal Marsh leaned forward to examine the documents. His face paled. When my son checked the system earlier today, Darius continued, he discovered that the third complaint, submission number 5103, had been changed from archived to deleted by administrator. He turned his gaze to Vice Principal Slade, who had not moved from her position by the window. The deletion occurred on October 30th at 11:47 a.m. I would be very interested to know which administrator performed that action and why. Slade's composure cracked just slightly, a tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible shift in her stance. General Carter, our system has technical issues sometimes. Files can be accidentally deleted by a specific administrator on a specific date at a specific time. Darius shook his head slowly. That is a very precise accident, Ms. Slade. He reached into the folder again and produced a printout, a screenshot of the system log Jalen had captured that morning. My son took this screenshot before coming to school today. It shows the exact timestamp and the user ID associated with the deletion. He paused, allowing the information to settle. The user ID is R. Slade. The room went completely still. Principal Marsh's eyes moved between the document and his vice principal. Whatever color remained in his face drained away entirely. Ruth? His voice was barely above a whisper. Is this true? Slade's jaw tightened. David, this is not the appropriate venue to discuss internal administrative. Answer the question. Darius's voice cut through her deflection like a blade. Did you delete my son's complaint about being bullied at this school? For a long moment, Slade said nothing. Then her shoulders dropped, almost imperceptibly. The situation was more complicated than a simple complaint form could capture. Bradley Prescott's father is a state senator. Darius finished her sentence. Yes, I am aware. Is that why you deleted the complaint? Because the boy who was bullying my son has a powerful father. Slade's silence was its own answer. Darius stood. The movement was slow, controlled, but it changed the energy of the room entirely. He was not a tall man, but in that moment, he seemed to fill every corner of the office. Let me explain something to both of you. His voice was quiet now, almost conversational, which somehow made it more frightening. For the past 14 months, I have been deployed on operations I cannot discuss, in locations I cannot name, dealing with threats to national security that would keep most people awake at night. I did this because I genuinely believed, that while I was protecting this country, my country would protect my son. He paused, letting the words land. Instead, I returned to find that my 12-year-old boy has been physically assaulted, verbally abused, and publicly humiliated, and the people who were supposed to help him chose to delete his cries for help because they were afraid of a local politician. Principal Marsh opened his mouth, but no words emerged. I have not yet decided, Darius continued, what actions I will take in response to what I have learned today. But I want you both to understand something clearly. I am not a man who makes threats. I am a man who makes decisions, and I am a man who follows through. He picked up the folder from the desk. Within the next 48 hours, I will be contacting the superintendent of this school district. I will also be contacting the Virginia Department of Education, the Office for Civil Rights, and my attorneys. I have not yet decided whether to involve the media, but that option remains on the table. He turned toward the door, placing his hand on Jalen's shoulder. You will be hearing from me again. In the meantime, I suggest you begin reviewing your records. All of them. The door closed behind them with a soft click. The drive home was quiet. Jalen sat in the back seat of the SUV beside his father, watching the familiar streets of his neighborhood pass by the tinted windows. Everything looked the same: the houses, the trees, the cars parked in driveways, but everything felt different. Dad? Yes? How long are you home? Darius was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than Jalen had heard it all day. I do not know yet. My current assignment is complete, but there will be others. There are always others. Jalen nodded, expecting this answer. He had learned long ago not to ask his father for promises he could not keep. But I am here now, Darius continued, and whatever time I have, I am spending it with you. That I can promise. The SUV turned onto their street. Ruth Carter's house came into view. A modest two-story, with a garden she tended every summer and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Dad? Yes? I am glad you came. Darius's hand found his son's and squeezed. So am I. Ruth Carter met them at the door. She was a woman who had survived loss and hardship with grace, who had raised her grandson while her son protected the world, who had learned to hold her family together through absences that stretched into years. When she saw Darius standing on her porch, still in uniform, her eyes filled with tears. You came. You called. He embraced her gently. I am sorry it took so long. You are here now. She pulled back, wiping her eyes, then looked at Jalen. Both of you. Inside. I have dinner waiting. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and memory. Jalen set the table while his grandmother fussed over serving sizes and his father washed his hands at the sink. The scene was so ordinary, so domestic, that it almost seemed impossible. Tell me everything, Ruth said as they sat down. From the beginning. So they told her. Jalen described the bullying, the daily torments from Bradley, the dismissive responses from teachers and administrators, the complaints that disappeared into a system designed to protect everyone except him. Darius added what he had witnessed in the classroom, the words he had overheard from the hallway, the confrontation with Principal Marsh and Vice Principal Slade. Ruth listened without interruption. When they finished, she was silent for a long moment. That Harmon woman, she finally said. The teacher. What did she say exactly? The words she used. Jalen's voice was quiet. She said kids like me need to know our place. Ruth's expression hardened into something cold and ancient. I see. Grandma, I have lived 72 years in this country, she continued, her voice steady but sharp. I have seen things get better, and things get worse, and things stay exactly the same under different names. I thought, I hoped, that by the time you were growing up, things would be different, that you would not have to hear those words, that you would not have to fight the same fights. She reached across the table and took Jalen's hand. I was wrong, but you know what? You handled it better than most grown men would. You documented everything. You kept copies. You told the truth, even when nobody believed you. That takes courage, baby. Real courage. Jalen felt tears threatening again. He blinked them back. What happens now? He asked. Darius and Ruth exchanged a look. The kind of silent communication that develops between people who have weathered decades together. Now, Darius said, we fight. But we fight smart. We gather evidence. We follow procedures. We make sure that when we take action, it sticks. And we do not stop, Ruth added, until everyone responsible is held accountable, not just for what they did to you, but for what they have done to others. Because you are not the only one, Jalen. You are never the only one. The following 2 weeks moved with the slow precision of a military operation. Darius filed formal complaints with the superintendent's office, requesting all records related to Jalen's enrollment, disciplinary history, and submitted grievances. The request was submitted under the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which required the district to respond within 45 days, though Darius made clear he expected a response considerably sooner. He also contacted the Virginia Department of Education, filing a complaint alleging violations of the state's anti-bullying statute. Under Virginia Code Section 22.1 to 279.6, every school district was required to implement policies prohibiting bullying and harassment, with clear procedures for investigation and response. The deletion of Jalen's complaints represented a potential violation of these requirements. Meanwhile, Colonel Webb coordinated with military legal affairs to ensure that any actions taken would be appropriate for an officer of Darius's rank. There were protocols to consider, optics to manage, chains of command to respect. A 4-star general making public accusations against a school district was not a small matter. "Sir," Webb said during one of their planning sessions, "have you considered the possibility that this could affect your next assignment?" "I have considered it." Darius did not look up from the documents he was reviewing. "I have also considered the possibility that my son needed me, and I was not there. Some things matter more than assignments." Webb nodded slowly. In 15 years of working with General Carter, he had never seen the man prioritize anything over duty. But he was beginning to understand that for Darius, this was duty, just a different kind. The evidence continued to accumulate. Jalen's screenshot of the deleted complaint was authenticated by a digital forensics specialist who confirmed the timestamp and user identification. Mrs. Okonkwo, the math teacher who had always believed in Jalen, came forward with her own documentation, including the STEM application she had recovered from Coach Nolan's trash can. "I found it 3 weeks ago," she explained during a meeting at the Carter home. "I did not know what to do at first. Coach Nolan is protected by the athletic department, and I am just a math teacher. But when I heard what happened in Ms. Harmon's classroom, I knew I had to speak up." She handed over the application, 43 pages of Jalen's research on electromagnetic propulsion, now wrinkled and coffee-stained from its time in the garbage. "This is brilliant work," she said, looking at Jalen. "It deserved to be considered. The fact that someone threw it away because of who you are, that is not something I can ignore." The application became Exhibit D in the growing case file. Coach Nolan's phone records, obtained through a formal discovery request, revealed the text message Jalen had glimpsed through the office window. The message from RS, confirmed to be Ruth Slade's initials, explicitly instructed Nolan to keep things quiet because Senator Prescott's campaign could not handle negative publicity before the election. This became Exhibit E security camera footage from the gymnasium hallway, footage that Vice Principal Slade had claimed was unavailable due to equipment malfunction, was retrieved from the cloud storage system maintained by the school's security contractor. The footage showed Bradley Prescott and 3 other students entering the boys' locker room 47 minutes before Jalen discovered his destroyed clothing. This became Exhibit F. 2 weeks after General Carter's arrival at Riverside Middle School, the district superintendent announced that a formal hearing would be held to address the allegations of policy violations and employee misconduct. The hearing was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in the school board's main conference room. Under Virginia law, disciplinary proceedings against school employees were typically closed to the public, but certain portions, particularly those involving policy review and administrative decisions, could be conducted in open session. The room was packed. Parents who had heard rumors filled the seats. Local journalists, tipped off by someone inside the district, set up cameras in the back. Community members who had their own stories about Riverside Middle School came to bear witness. Jalen sat in the front row beside his father and grandmother. He wore a button-down shirt his grandmother had pressed that morning, and his hands were folded carefully in his lap. He had not slept well the night before. The anticipation had kept him staring at the ceiling, counting cracks, waiting for morning. The hearing was called to order at 7:03 p.m. Superintendent Margaret Chen presided from the center of the raised platform. She was a woman in her early 60s, with a reputation for fairness that had survived 3 decades in public education. Beside her sat the district's legal counsel and 2 members of the school board. "This hearing has been convened," Chen began, "to address formal complaints filed against Riverside Middle School concerning allegations of policy violations related to anti-bullying procedures, document destruction, and employee conduct. The complainant is General Darius Carter, on behalf of his minor son, Jalen Carter." She looked out over the crowded room. Due to the nature of the allegations and the public interest in this matter, portions of this hearing will be conducted in open session. However, specific personnel actions will be addressed in closed session following the presentation of evidence. Is that understood by all parties? Nods around the room. Darius stood. "Superintendent Chen, I appreciate the board's willingness to address this matter formally. With your permission, I would like to present the evidence that has been gathered over the past 2 weeks." "Proceed, General Carter." Darius approached the podium at the front of the room. Behind him, Colonel Webb operated a laptop connected to the room's projection system. "On September 15th of this year, my son Jalen filed a complaint through Riverside Middle School's online reporting system. The complaint documented ongoing harassment by a fellow student, including verbal abuse and physical intimidation. The complaint was assigned submission number 4471 and marked as received. A document appeared on the screen, Jalen's first complaint form, time-stamped and numbered. On October 2nd, Jalen filed a second complaint documenting continued harassment, including an incident in the school cafeteria where food was deliberately poured on him. This complaint was assigned submission number 4892. A second document appeared. On October 28th, Jalen filed a third complaint documenting physical destruction of his personal property. This complaint was assigned submission number 5103. A third document appeared, but this one included an additional notation highlighted in yellow. As you can see, this third complaint was initially marked as archived. However, on October 30th at 11:47 a.m., the status was changed to deleted by administrator. The system log identifies the user who performed this deletion as R. Slade. Murmurs rippled through the room. Vice Principal Slade, seated in the second row, kept her eyes fixed straight ahead. "When my son attempted to report the deletion to the Vice Principal's office," Darius continued, "he was told that there was no record of his complaints and that he needed written witness statements before any action could be taken. He was not informed that his complaints had been deliberately destroyed." The screen changed to show the screenshot Jalen had taken. The system log with its damning timestamp and user identification. "This screenshot was taken by my son on the morning of November 12th, before he left for school. It has been authenticated by a digital forensics specialist whose report is included in the evidence packet provided to the board." Darius paused, allowing the information to settle. The deletion of student complaints is a violation of Virginia Code Section 22.1-279.6, which requires school districts to maintain records of all reported incidents of bullying and to investigate each report within 5 business days. The statute does not permit administrators to delete reports because they find them inconvenient. He turned to the next piece of evidence. In addition to the deleted complaints, we have obtained text messages sent between Vice Principal Ruth Slade and Coach Derek Nolan on October 29th, one day before the complaint was deleted. The screen showed the text message Jalen had glimpsed through the office window, now retrieved through formal discovery. The message reads, quote, "Derek, keep it contained. Senator Prescott does not want drama before the election. RS, end quote." The murmurs grew louder. Several audience members turned to look at a man seated near the back of the room, State Senator Thomas Prescott, who had arrived with his son Bradley and a lawyer in an expensive suit. This message suggests coordination between school administrators to suppress complaints against a student whose father holds political office. It suggests that decisions about student discipline were being made based on political considerations rather than the welfare of the students involved. Darius continued through the evidence: the security footage, the discarded STEM application, the documented pattern of unequal treatment. Each piece added weight to the picture of a system that had failed to protect a child because protecting him was inconvenient. When he finished, nearly an hour had passed. The room was silent. Superintendent Chen cleared her throat. "Thank you, General Carter. Does the district council wish to respond?" The district's lawyer, a nervous-looking man named Peterson, rose from his seat. "Superintendent, while we acknowledge that procedural irregularities may have occurred, we believe this matter can be resolved through administrative channels without—" "Mr. Peterson," Chen's voice was sharp. "A student's formal complaints were deleted from our system by an administrator. Text messages show coordination to suppress those complaints for political reasons. Security footage was falsely reported as unavailable. At what point do procedural irregularities become something more serious?" Peterson had no answer. "I have heard enough," Chen continued. "We will now move to closed session to discuss specific personnel actions. However, I want to make several things clear on the record." She looked directly at Jalen, who sat rigid in his seat. "Young man, what happened to you was wrong. The adults who were supposed to protect you failed in their responsibilities. On behalf of this school district, I am sorry." Jalen nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak. "Effective immediately," Chen continued, "I am ordering a full audit of our complaint tracking system to identify any other reports that may have been improperly deleted or archived. I am also ordering a review of all disciplinary actions taken against students at Riverside Middle School over the past 2 years to identify potential patterns of unequal treatment." She paused. "And I am recommending to this board that we request an independent investigation by the Virginia Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. If what we have seen tonight is indicative of systemic problems, we need outside eyes to help us identify and correct them." The school board members exchanged glances, then nodded their agreement. "We will now take a 15-minute recess before continuing in closed session." The closed session lasted 2 hours. When the doors finally opened, the announcement was brief but significant. Vice Principal Ruth Slade had been placed on administrative leave with pay, pending completion of the formal investigation. Coach Derek Nolan had been removed from his position as faculty sponsor for all extracurricular activities and reassigned to administrative duties with no student contact. Miss Greta Harmon had been placed on administrative leave, also pending investigation. Bradley Prescott had been suspended from school for 10 days and required to complete a behavioral intervention program before returning. The other students identified in the security footage would face similar consequences. The district committed to implementing new procedures for complaint tracking, including automatic notifications to parents whenever a report was filed and prohibitions on deletion of any submitted documents. None of these outcomes were final. The investigations would continue. The legal process would unfold over months, perhaps years. But for tonight, it was a beginning. Outside the school board building, the November air was cold and clean. Jalen stood with his father and grandmother, watching the last of the attendees filter out into the parking lot. Senator Prescott and his son left quickly, surrounded by aides and avoiding all eye contact. Coach Nolan departed through a side door. Vice Principal Slade did not appear at all. She had apparently left during the closed session. Mrs. Okonkwo found them before heading to her car. "Jalen," she smiled warmly, "I spoke to the STEM competition coordinator this afternoon. Your application has been accepted. The regional competition is in January." For the first time in what felt like months, Jalen smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Okonkwo, for everything." "You did the work," she replied. "I just made sure it was seen." She nodded to Darius and Ruth, then walked away into the night. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, watching her go. "It is not over," Darius finally said. "There will be appeals and delays, and people trying to minimize what happened. The system protects itself." "I know," Jalen replied. "But we made a start. We put the truth on the record. That matters." Ruth put her arm around her grandson. "Let us go home," she said. "I think we have all earned a good night's sleep." 1 week later, Jalen returned to school. The hallways felt different. Not transformed, that would take more than a single hearing, but different. Students who had ignored him before nodded as he passed. Teachers who had looked through him now met his eyes. His locker was clean. No spray paint, no scratched messages. Someone had even polished the metal. He walked to his first class with his shoulders straight and his head high. Not because everything was fixed, it was not, but because he had learned something in the past month. He had learned that telling the truth mattered, even when no one believed you. He had learned that keeping records mattered, even when the system tried to erase them. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to stand up anyway. In history class, a substitute teacher stood where Ms. Harmon had once held court. The woman smiled nervously at Jalen as he entered. "You must be Jalen Carter. I have heard a lot about you." "Yes, ma'am. Well," she gestured to the classroom, "I hope we can make this a good semester for everyone." Jalen took his seat, not in the back row this time, but in the middle of the room. He set his books on the desk and waited for class to begin. Behind him he heard whispers, some curious, some resentful, some simply trying to process what had happened. He did not turn around. The bell rang. The substitute began her lesson, and Jalen Carter, son of a 4-star general, survivor of a system that had tried to break him, opened his notebook and started to write. 3 weeks later, Thanksgiving. The Carter house was full of people for the first time in years. Ruth had invited neighbors, church friends, a few of Darius's colleagues who had no family nearby. The kitchen overflowed with food, turkey and stuffing, and 3 kinds of pie. Jalen helped set the table, counting plates and silverware the way he had counted everything for as long as he could remember. 14 place settings, 14 people who would share this meal. His father found him in the dining room, arranging napkins with military precision. "You okay?" "Yes, sir." Jalen paused. "It feels strange, having people here." "Good strange or bad strange?" Jalen considered the question. "Good strange, I think. Different." Darius nodded. He leaned against the door frame, watching his son work. "I have to tell you something." Jalen looked up. "I received new orders yesterday. There is a situation developing that requires my attention. I will need to leave in January." The words landed like stones in still water. Jalen felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the practiced response to disappointment. How long? I do not know. It could be months. It could be longer. Jalen returned to arranging napkins. His hands did not tremble. His voice did not crack. Okay. Jalen. Darius crossed the room and put his hand on his son's shoulder. I know this is not what you wanted to hear. I know you have had to grow up faster than any child should. But I need you to understand something. He waited until Jalen met his eyes. I am proud of you. Not because of what happened at school, although that took tremendous courage. I am proud of you because of who you are every day. The way you take care of your grandmother, the way you pursue your studies, the way you carry yourself with dignity even when the world gives you every reason not to. His voice softened. I cannot promise I will always be here. The job I do, it does not allow for those kinds of promises, but I can promise you this. No matter where I am, no matter what I am doing, you are never alone. You carry our family with you. You carry our history, our strength, our stubborn refusal to be diminished by people who cannot see our worth. Jalen's eyes glistened, but he did not look away. I know, Dad. Do you? Yes. Jalen straightened his shoulders. I know. Darius pulled his son into an embrace. Brief, firm, the hug of two people who understood that love did not require constant presence, only constant truth. Now, he said, releasing Jalen with a smile, let us go eat too much food and pretend we have room for all 3 pies. This story touched over 2 million people because it speaks to something real. If it meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. December brought cold winds and final exams. Jalen threw himself into his studies, preparing for the STEM regional competition in January while maintaining his grades across all subjects. Mrs. Okonkwo met with him twice a week to review his research and refine his presentation. Your methodology section needs work, she said during one session. The judges will want to see more rigorous documentation of your testing procedures. Yes, ma'am. Jalen made notes in his binder. I can add graphs showing the variance in my measurements. Good. And practice your timing. You have exactly 8 minutes for the presentation and 4 minutes for questions, not a second more. The discipline was familiar, comforting even. Jalen had spent his whole life measuring and counting and preparing. Now those habits served a purpose beyond survival. At school, things had changed, but not transformed. Bradley Prescott had returned from his suspension quieter, more subdued. He no longer held court in the hallways or led groups of students in their daily torments. But he had not become friendly either. He simply avoided Jalen entirely, walking in different directions whenever their paths might cross. The other students were more complicated. Some clearly resented the attention the incident had brought to their school. Others seemed to view Jalen with new respect, or perhaps just new wariness. A few had approached him tentatively, offering awkward apologies for not speaking up sooner. I should have said something, one girl told him, when Ms. Harmon was yelling at you. I knew it was wrong, but I did not know what to do. Jalen accepted the apology with grace. It is okay. It is hard to speak up when you are scared. But you did. You kept speaking up, even when nobody believed you. I had to. It was the truth. The day before winter break, an envelope arrived at the Carter house. It was addressed to Jalen, with a return address from the Virginia Department of Education. He opened it at the kitchen table while his grandmother watched. Dear Mr. Carter, Following our investigation into your complaint regarding Riverside Middle School, we have determined that the school district violated multiple provisions of Virginia Code Section 22.1 to 79.6 related to bullying prevention and complaint documentation. Specifically, we found 1. Student complaints were improperly deleted from the district's tracking system in violation of record-keeping requirements. 2. The district failed to investigate reported incidents within the required 5-business-day timeline. 3. Administrative decisions regarding student discipline were influenced by factors unrelated to student welfare. As a result of these findings, we are requiring the school district to implement a corrective action plan, which must include revised procedures for complaint tracking, mandatory training for all staff on anti-bullying policies, and regular audits of disciplinary actions to identify potential patterns of unequal treatment. We have also forwarded our findings to the Office for Civil Rights for review of potential civil rights violations. Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. Your courage in documenting and reporting these incidents has helped identify systemic problems that affect many students beyond yourself. Sincerely, Dr. Patricia Vasquez, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, Virginia Department of Education. Jalen read the letter twice, then handed it to his grandmother. "It is official," he said. "They found violations." Ruth read the letter, her expression shifting from concern to relief, to something like triumph. "You did this," she said. "You and your father, but mostly you. You kept those records. You took those screenshots. You refused to let them make you invisible. It took a long time. Important things usually do." She set the letter down and took his hands. But it happened. The truth came out. And now maybe the next child who gets bullied at that school will not have to fight so hard to be heard. Christmas Eve was quiet. Ruth cooked a smaller meal. Just the 3 of them this time, Darius home for a few more weeks before his new deployment. They ate by candlelight, while snow fell softly outside the windows. "I have something for you," Darius said after dinner. He handed Jalen a small wrapped package. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with the Military Academy crest. "This belonged to my father," Darius explained. "He kept it during his years of service, wrote about the things he saw, the challenges he faced, the lessons he learned. When I was your age, he gave it to me. Now I am giving it to you." Jalen opened the journal carefully. The pages were filled with his grandfather's handwriting, a man he had never met, who had died before Jalen was born. He wrote about being a black officer in an army that was not always welcoming, Darius continued, about the fights he had to win just to be seen as equal, about the times he wanted to give up and the reasons he did not. He pointed to a passage near the front of the journal. "Read that one." Jalen read aloud, his voice soft in the candlelit room. "The hardest battles are not fought with weapons. They are fought with truth, with persistence, with the stubborn refusal to accept injustice as normal. Every time we stand up, we make it easier for the next person to stand. Every time we speak, we give voice to those who cannot yet find their own. This is the work that never ends. This is the work that matters most." He looked up at his father. He could have written this about what happened to me. He could have written it about any of us. Darius smiled. "That is the point. The fight changes, but the principles stay the same. Truth matters. Persistence matters. Standing up matters, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard." Jalen closed the journal and held it against his chest. "Thank you, Dad. Thank your grandfather. He is the one who taught me everything I know about courage. January arrived with bitter cold and the regional STEM competition. The event was held at a university campus 2 hours from home. Jalen rode in the back of his grandmother's car, the same 1992 sedan that Bradley had mocked, still running after all these years, with his presentation materials carefully organized in a folder on his lap. Mrs. Okonkwo met them at the registration desk. "You are in Group C," she said, checking the schedule. "Your presentation slot is at 2:15. That gives you 3 hours to review your notes and watch some of the other presentations." Jalen nodded. His stomach was tight with nerves, but his mind was clear. "I am ready." The competition was fierce. Students from across the region had brought projects on everything from renewable energy to artificial intelligence to biochemical engineering. Jalen watched several presentations before his own, taking mental notes on what worked and what did not. At 2:15, he walked to the front of the room. The judges sat at a long table, 3 professors from the university, all with clipboards and skeptical expressions. Behind them, a small audience of students and parents watched. Jalen took a breath. He thought of his father, thousands of miles away. He thought of his grandmother, sitting in the back row. He thought of all the times he had been told he did not belong, did not deserve, did not measure up. Then he began. "Good afternoon. My name is Jalen Carter, and my project investigates the potential applications of electromagnetic propulsion systems for sustainable transportation." For the next 8 minutes, he explained his research with precision and passion. He described his methodology, presented his data, discussed his conclusions. When the timer beeped, he stopped mid-sentence and stepped back from the podium. The questions came quickly. What are the limitations of your experimental design? How do you account for the variance in your measurements? What are the practical barriers to implementing this technology at scale? Jalen answered each question carefully, honestly, acknowledging what he did not know while defending what he had learned. When the 4 minutes were up, the head judge nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. We will announce results at 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, Jalen stood with the other competitors in the main auditorium. His grandmother sat in the audience, Mrs. Okonkwo beside her. His heart pounded against his ribs. The third-place winner was announced, a girl from Richmond whose project involved machine learning applications for weather prediction. The second-place winner was announced, a boy from Alexandria who had designed a water purification system using solar energy. The head judge paused before announcing first place. Jalen felt the room hold its breath. First place in the regional STEM competition goes to Jalen Carter from Riverside Middle School for his project on electromagnetic propulsion systems. The applause was immediate and overwhelming. Jalen stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what he had heard. Then Mrs. Okonkwo was hugging him, and his grandmother was crying, and someone was pressing a trophy into his hands. He had won. Not because of who his father was, not because of what had happened at school, but because of his own work, his own ideas, his own refusal to give up. Later, holding the trophy in the car on the way home, Jalen called his father. "I won," he said. "First place." Through the phone, he could hear Darius's smile. "I knew you would. I am proud of you, son. So proud. I wish you could have been there." "Me too, but I was with you anyway. I am always with you." Spring came slowly to Virginia that year. The snow melted into mud, then grass, then the first tentative blooms of cherry blossoms. Riverside Middle School, the changes continued. A new vice principal had been hired, a woman named Dr. Cynthia Warren, who had spent 20 years working in schools with diverse populations. She had implemented new protocols for complaint tracking, including a system that automatically notified parents whenever a report was filed. Ms. Harmon had not returned. The official story was that she had chosen to pursue other opportunities. The unofficial story, whispered in hallways and teachers' lounges, was that she had been given a choice: resign quietly or face formal termination proceedings. Coach Nolan remained at the school, but in a diminished capacity. He no longer coached any sports teams, no longer sponsored any clubs. He taught physical education classes and left campus immediately when the final bell rang. Vice Principal Slade had also resigned. Her departure had been announced with the usual language about new challenges and opportunities. No one believed it. Bradley Prescott had transferred to a private school across the county. His father, Senator Prescott, had narrowly won his re-election campaign, but the margin had been closer than expected. Some people remembered the hearing. Some people always remember. On the last day of 7th grade, Jalen cleaned out his locker for the final time. Number 247, positioned between the gym and the science wing. The metal door swung open to reveal the small shelf where he had kept his books, the hook where he had hung his jacket, the magnetic mirror his grandmother had given him on the first day of school. He packed everything into his backpack, then stood for a moment, looking at the empty space. So much had happened in front of this locker. So much pain, so much fear, so much quiet determination. He had learned things here that no textbook could teach, about courage, about persistence, about the cost and value of truth. Jalen? He turned. Mrs. Okonkwo stood in the hallway, a smile on her face. I wanted to say goodbye before summer, and to tell you, the state competition results came in. You placed 3rd in the state. 3rd in the state, out of thousands of students across Virginia. Thank you, Mrs. Okonkwo, for everything. You did the work, she said. I just helped you find the door. He closed his locker one last time and walked toward the exit. The hallway was crowded with students celebrating the end of the year, but Jalen moved through them easily. He was no longer invisible, but he was also no longer afraid of being seen. Outside, his grandmother waited in the parking lot. The 1992 sedan gleamed in the afternoon sun. She had washed it that morning, in honor of the occasion. Ready to go? She called. Ready. He climbed into the car and buckled his seatbelt. As they pulled out of the parking lot, he looked back at Riverside Middle School one last time. The building looked the same as it always had: brick and glass and motivational posters in the windows. But Jalen knew it was different now. He had made it different. Not perfect, not transformed, but different. A little more just, a little more honest, a little more willing to see children as they truly were, rather than as assumptions allowed. It was enough. For now, it was enough. That evening, a video call connected the Carter house to a military base on the other side of the world. Darius appeared on the screen in his uniform, looking tired but happy. I heard you finished strong, he said. 3rd in the state. Yes, sir. And your grades? All A's. Mrs. Okonkwo says I am ready for the advanced program next year. Darius nodded. I expected nothing less. They talked for half an hour. About school, about summer plans, about the things fathers and sons discuss when time is precious and distance is vast. When the connection began to fade, Darius leaned closer to the camera. I will be home in August, he said. 2 weeks of leave before the next assignment. Really? Really? I put in the request 3 months ago, approved yesterday. Jalen felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he had carried for so long that he had forgotten it was there. I will be here, he said. Waiting. I know you will. Darius smiled. You always are. The screen went dark. Jalen sat in the quiet living room, listening to the sounds of his grandmother preparing dinner in the kitchen. He thought about everything that had happened since September. The bullying, the deleted complaints, the teacher who had told him to know his place, the father who had walked through the door at exactly the right moment. He thought about the hearing, the investigation, the slow, grinding work of holding people accountable. He thought about the STEM competition, the trophy that now sat on his bookshelf, the validation of his own abilities. And he thought about the future, 8th grade, high school, college, whatever came after. A future that was not guaranteed, not easy, but possible. A future he had earned the right to imagine. On his desk in his bedroom, beneath the trophy and beside his grandfather's journal, sat a folder of documents. The original complaint forms, now returned to him by the school district. The screenshots. The letter from the Department of Education. Evidence, records. Truth. He would keep them forever. Not because he needed them anymore, but because they proved something important. They proved that a 12-year-old boy had told the truth when no one believed him. They proved that he had fought back against a system designed to silence him. They proved that courage was not about being unafraid, but about standing up anyway. Jalen opened his grandfather's journal and found a blank page near the back. He picked up a pen and began to write. Today is the last day of 7th grade. I survived. More than that, I won. Not just the competition, but everything. The bullying, the lies, the people who wanted me to disappear. Dad says the fight never really ends. He says there will always be people who look at me and see only what they expect to see. He says I will have to prove myself over and over, in ways that other people never have to. I believe him, but I also believe this. Every time I stand up, it gets a little easier. Every time I tell the truth, it gets a little stronger. Every time someone tries to make me small, I have a choice. To shrink or to grow. I choose to grow. He closed the journal and placed it carefully in his desk drawer. Outside his window, the sun was setting over Virginia. The sky blazed orange and gold, the colors of endings and beginnings. Somewhere across the world, his father was watching the same sky. Somewhere in the next room, his grandmother was humming while she cooked. And here, in his small bedroom, Jalen Carter sat surrounded by evidence of his own courage. A trophy, a journal, a folder of truth. He had told them who his father was. They had not believed him. And then the door had opened, and a general had walked in, and everything had changed. But the real change, the change that mattered most, had happened long before that moment. It had happened every time Jalen refused to lie. Every time he filed a complaint that got deleted. Every time he stood up straight when they wanted him to cower. The door had opened because he had never stopped knocking. And now, finally, he could rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Next year would bring new battles. The world would not suddenly become fair just because he had won one fight. But tonight, on the last day of 7th grade, Jalen Carter knew exactly who he was and exactly what he was capable of. And that was enough. That was everything. 3 months later, the August sun beat down on the tarmac as the military transport touched down at Andrews Air Force Base. Jalen stood with his grandmother behind the security barrier, watching the massive aircraft taxi toward the terminal. His heart pounded. 3 months of video calls and letters and counting down days. 3 months of waiting. The aircraft door opened. Figures emerged. Officers and enlisted personnel, moving with the precision of people who had spent months in service. And then, there he was. General Darius Carter walked down the stairs in his dress uniform, 4 stars gleaming in the sunlight. He spotted his family immediately, his mother, his son, standing together behind the barrier. Protocol required him to report to his commanding officer first. Protocol required him to complete the formal arrival procedures before any personal business. Darius Carter walked directly to his son. "Dad?" "Jalen!" The embrace was fierce and brief, 2 soldiers greeting each other after a long campaign. When they separated, Darius kept one hand on his son's shoulder. "You look taller," he said. "I grew 2 inches," Jalen replied. "Grandma had to buy me new pants." "She told me," Darius smiled. "She tells me everything." Ruth joined them, completing the circle. The 3 of them stood together in the August heat, a family reunited, a story continuing. "Let us go home," Ruth said. "I made your favorite." They walked toward the parking lot together. Jalen fell into step beside his father, matching his stride automatically. "Dad?" "Yes?" "I have something to show you. My research for next year's competition. I have been working on it all summer." "I would like to see it." "And I finished Grandpa's journal. I read every page." Darius glanced at his son. "What did you think?" Jalen considered the question carefully, the way he considered everything now. "I think he would be proud of us," he finally said. "I think he would say we did the work." Darius nodded slowly. "I think so, too." They reached the car, the 1992 sedan, still running, still carrying the Carter family wherever they needed to go. Jalen climbed into the back seat. His father took the front. As they pulled away from the base, Jalen watched his father's profile against the window. The strong jaw, the quiet eyes, the 4 stars that represented 30 years of service. His father had walked through a classroom door and changed everything. But Jalen had been the one to keep knocking until the door finally opened. They were both heroes. They were both ordinary. They were both exactly what they needed to be. The car turned onto the highway, heading home. Above them, the summer sky stretched endless and blue, full of possibilities.